Well, good afternoon. Whoa, that is loud. That is hot. I'm Matt Gress. I'm the governor's budget director, and we're here to roll out the fiscal year 2021 budget. Before we begin, for those of you who are watching online, or for those of you who are in the audience and you have a smartphone, you can email your questions about the budget to engage at az.gov, and we'll work to get those answered. So without further ado, we want to get move along with the governor's budget, and I want to share with you the common sense approach that the governor takes. It's about expanding opportunity for all, and he's calling it the Arizona way. And that comes with a clear mandate that government should run at the speed of business, to decide faster, respond faster, resolve faster, to move more services online, and to save taxpayers money. And this 2021 budget reflects that philosophy. So over the next hour, we will give an overview of the economy, both on the national level and here in Arizona, and its impact on state revenues. We'll talk about supplemental funding initiatives, and then we'll move to an overview of where our resources are being allocated, and then go into details about the specific areas of our investment. So without further ado, I'll introduce Glenn.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Glenn Farley, and I'm OSPB's chief economist. And before I go into the economic and revenue assumptions that underlie the fiscal year 2021 executive budget, I just wanted to briefly touch on something that Matt alluded to, but what's really kind of a highlight of this budget, which is that thanks to our conservative fiscal management over the past couple of years in state and federal tax reform, the 2021 budget is really being built on the strongest cash and structural foundation of any budget in the post-recession period. I'll start by talking about national economic growth. As we've discussed for a couple of years now, the nation as a whole saw an acceleration in growth from that slow but steady post-recession trend to a new level beginning around late 2017 and continuing into 2018. While you can't see that trend reflected into the real GDP data, it's even more clear in certain key indicators. Specifically, the unemployment rate nationally is at 50-year lows. The manufacturing sector nationally is the strongest it's been in over 30 years. And consumer confidence has reached 10-year highs. Having said that, as we went into 2019, there was some slowdown in a couple of those indicators that gave us some pause. Specifically, real GDP growth in the past few quarters has been closer to that post-recession average of 2% than that post-2017 average of 2.5% to 3%. Further, the manufacturing sector, whose acceleration into 2018 led that speed up nationally, has also led the slowdown, with growth slowing and then plateauing, as you can see in that orange line. So what we really looked at was sort of the potential downstream effects that national slowdown could have on state revenues, at least in the near future. On the other hand, turning locally, growth in Arizona has been both remarkably consistent and remarkably resilient in the face of those national trends. Specifically, the core indicators of personal income and employment growth remain at or near post-recession highs of about 5% and 3% respectively. Most strikingly, we remain both well above the national average growth, as you can see in the hash lines, and very stable, as in there's no corresponding signs of a slowdown at the state level, mirroring the slowdown that we showed on the prior slide at the national level. Given those trends, the executive anticipates continued growth in the 4.5% to 5% range for personal income and 3% range for employment over the next several years. Like I discussed at the national level, Arizona's manufacturing sector really experienced a resurgence around late 2017 into 2018 that we haven't seen since about 1980. Manufacturing was a relatively stagnant sector from 1980 to 2017. As you can see here reflected in employment growth rates, those shifted nationally in here in the green and orange lines into 2018. On the other hand, we see a divergence in Arizona from the nation going into 2019. After the first couple of months, it looked like we were mirroring that national slowdown I alluded to, but in the past few months, growth has sped back up and stuck to those post-2017 levels, even as the nation as a whole in the orange line has continued to slow. That's something that we consider extremely bullish for the state specifically. Arizona's good economic fortunes are not limited to just its manufacturing sector, but we had the second strongest manufacturing job growth of any state in the country last year. We also had the third strongest construction job growth rate. We were rated #1 for inbound U.S. states in terms of domestic migration. Strikingly, Arizona captured about 10% of total net migration in 2018, despite being about 2% of the country's population. Since 2015, we've added 350,000 new people to the state, and we continue to add about 300 new jobs every day. Considered collectively, this body of information is telling us that Arizona is strong, is likely to continue to be strong, and is going to be resilient in the face of any potential slowdown nationally. As I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, though, our strength isn't just limited to our economy. We're also building the 2021 executive budget on a fiscal foundation that's the strongest it's been perhaps ever. We finished fiscal 2019 with $1.7 billion in combined cash reserves between the rainy day fund and the general fund at about 17% of total spending. We also had revenue growth last year of about 9%, even stronger than another strong year in 2018. So that's 2 very strong years of ongoing revenue growth, the largest cash reserves ever, so we're in a structural and cash position that's largely unprecedented in the post-recession period. Looking forward at the current year, one of the topics of discussion for the past several budgets that was prominent as we enacted the 2020 budget in May is when those revenue growth trends are going to return to their longer run averages. We had first 7, then 9% revenue growth. The thought was fiscal 20 will be the time when we will slow back down to a trend closer to the 3 and 3.5% level. Looking at what's happened in the first 5 months of fiscal 20, it appears that that was premature, and this is likely to be another strong fiscal year for the general fund. Specifically, year to date, we're up over 9%, as you can see there, or about $260 million above levels contemplated in May. The executive thinks it would be unrealistic or unreasonable to count on those levels sustaining throughout the whole fiscal year, especially with the volatile income tax months of April and May still ahead of us. But we think it would be equally unrealistic to assume levels closer to the 2.5% contemplated a couple of months ago. Therefore, the revised executive fiscal 21 forecast contemplates 5.3% general fund revenue growth in fiscal 20, which will create about $450 million more ongoing dollars than were contemplated when we enacted the budget in May. Consistent with that narrative I told about the national economy at the beginning of the presentation, that growth rate slows in fiscal 21 to 2.1% before picking back up closer to that long-run trend rate of 3.5% in the out years. Those conservative assumptions allow us to maintain approximately $450 million ongoing revenues throughout the forecast period, enabling us to meet the executive spending priorities without overcommitting or relying on over-aggressive revenue assumptions. The final thing I want to reiterate before we turn to the spending priorities contained in the executive budget is the link as we see it between fiscal and tax policy and state economic prospects and general fund revenue prospects. It's very rare that we get as striking a link as we got after passage of Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in late 2017, but we have made the argument since 2015 that good fiscal and tax policy promotes economic growth. This administration, to that point, has cut taxes every year since 2015 and intends to continue doing so. We do not think it is a coincidence that we have both the 14th lowest combined state and local tax rate in the country, and also, according to Pew, we're ranked 3rd for state economic momentum. To that point, the 21 budget includes the governor's largest net tax cut to date. We're proposing to use $45 million to eliminate the state income tax on veterans' military pension benefits. For the over 50,000 state veterans whose 20-plus years of military service have earned them a pension, they're going to receive a benefit of about $840 annually in state income tax cuts, thanks to this policy. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brittany, to talk more about our executive spending.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Detler, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Between fiscal year 2016 and fiscal year 21, the governor has restrained total spending growth to well below the levels of the mid-2000s. In more recent years, total spending has risen with rising revenues, allowing the state to invest over $4 billion in new funding over the last decade. The fiscal year 21 executive budget continues this practice, growing total spending by about 3.5% next year to about $12.3 billion, while still meeting all of our prior and new commitments, proving that we can be both fiscally responsible and meet the state's growing needs. After just 3 years of structural balance in the mid-2000s, the state entered a period of imbalance lasting nearly a decade. Since then, thanks to 5 consecutive fiscally conservative budgets, the state has enjoyed its longest run of structural surpluses since 2000. As you can see in the table above, the fiscal year 21 executive budget continues to honor the governor's commitment to being structurally balanced every year without exception, thanks to a $250 million structural surplus projected next year and a nearly $200 million surplus at the end of our 3-year outlook. From 1982 to 2002, general fund revenue growth followed a remarkably stable trend of approximately 3.5% annual growth. Revenues departed dramatically from this trend from 2002 to 2007, and spending followed suit, creating a massive and unsustainable fiscal bubble going into the Great Recession. Since then, revenues again have followed a fairly stable trend until about mid-fiscal year 2017. As Glenn described previously, growth has since surged. The budget really focuses on using these resources responsibly and not repeating past fiscal mistakes. We propose to do this by allowing for one-time spending on needed improvements when times are good, but controlling the overall pace of ongoing spending growth and avoiding large new permanent commitments. In fiscal year 2020, the Arizona's Rainy Day Fund hit approximately 8% of general fund spending, bringing the balance to over $1 billion. This was a major achievement for the state, as financial analysts suggest saving approximately 10% of general fund revenues for times of economic hardship. Without this needed investment, Arizona risked again being unprepared for an economic slowdown. To continue securing Arizona's fiscal future, the executive budget includes another $25 million deposit in fiscal year 21, which will bring our rainy day fund balance to almost 9% of general fund revenues. Last, turning to the current fiscal year, sometimes expectations don't align with reality and supplemental funding is needed. The executive provides $65 million in general fund funding for the agencies outlined in this chart, whose baseline needs exceeded what was contemplated last year. $35 million of this funding is dedicated to the School Facilities Board to fund an increase in building renewal grant projects this year. To date, 78% of the fiscal year 20 appropriation has already been awarded to districts for projects, and more demand is expected in the coming months. The executive wants to ensure that the board has all of the resources it needs to maintain our schools when they need it. Additionally, the executive budget provides $10 million in supplemental funding to agencies from other state sources. Next, my colleague Alec will give an overview of the fiscal 21 budget.
Thanks, Brittany. Good afternoon. I'm Alec Ulano, an analyst and executive assistant at OSPB. As Brittany said, the governor's overall philosophy is to meet our critical needs without tax increases, the Arizona way. As such, you won't be surprised that the majority of spending is both one-time and focused on areas of education and infrastructure. The baseline anticipates cash reserves of roughly $965 million, of which $776 million is dedicated to new initiative spending. Of that $776 million, nearly 2/3 of initiatives are one-time in nature, keeping consistent with our philosophy of avoiding mistakes from the past and abandoning unsustainable commitments. Additionally, the executive budget includes a $25 million deposit into the Rainy Day Fund. As the governor said last year, the state hasn't been saving enough. $1 billion is good, but we can do better. The executive budget heavily prioritizes spending on K-12, higher education, and roads and infrastructure. In fact, 58%, over half of the executive budget, is dedicated to higher education and K-12. After baseline funding, 64% of the total budget is dedicated to education. Beyond that, the executive makes targeted investments in public safety and other areas. You'll note that the baseline initiative spending, when combined, is lower than the total executive spending alone. This is because the executive baseline backs out substantial one-time commitments made in fiscal year 20. The executive budget continues to fulfill the governor's commitment to being structurally and cash balanced every year. The fiscal year 21 budget is no exception. In fact, the fiscal year 21 budget is the 4th consecutive structurally balanced budget. As you can see in the hatched green bars, we anticipate beginning fiscal year 21 with substantial cash reserves. The executive budget invests these one-time resources in areas of highest need while limiting the growth in ongoing spending as denoted by the dark yellow bars. As these one-time commitments fall off in fiscal years 22 and 23, the total spending falls, and revenues, or the dark blue bars, begin to outpace spending. This occurred despite the conservative out-year revenue assumptions Glenn talked about previously. Next is my colleague Sarah, and she'll be presenting on the education section.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Giles, and I'm a senior budget analyst with OSPB. Along with my colleagues Zach and Yan, we will be presenting on the fiscal year 2021 executive budget proposal for K-12 and higher education. This executive budget continues the governor's commitment to provide sustainable increases to K-12 and higher education funding, all without raising taxes. For example, between fiscal year 2015 and fiscal year 2020, the governor increased investment in K-12 by $4.5 billion cumulatively. Under the 2021 proposal, this number will increase to $6.6 billion, all without new tax increases. But the focus on education isn't limited to K-12, but includes workforce development and alignment efforts at the post-secondary level to prepare Arizona to compete in the next generation economy. Beginning with K-12, this budget includes $608 million in new investments, to include $145 million for enrollment growth, inflation, and other technical adjustments. This budget continues the governor's commitment to fund K-12 above and beyond inflation by providing an additional $463 million for initiatives that address teacher, student, and classroom needs. Several of these initiatives are listed on the right-hand side of the slide, and I'll review them in greater detail in later slides. Per pupil spending is a hot topic in the education community, and this year's budget continues to grow our investment in Arizona's students. Since fiscal year 2015, per pupil spending has increased 33% to an estimated $5,250 per pupil in fiscal year 2021. These sustainable investments in K-12 education are paying off, and we project that in fiscal year 2022, we will see per pupil spending exceed pre-Great Recession levels. But it won't stop there. Per pupil funding will continue to grow sustainably under the governor's leadership into fiscal year 2023 and beyond. Next, higher education. The executive budget includes $102 million in new investments in higher education at Arizona's public universities and community colleges. These investments enhance Arizona's efforts to align higher education with critical workforce development needs. Again, several of these initiatives are listed on the right hand of the slide, and we will review them in greater detail in later slides. The two largest items in the K-12 budget deliver on a $1 billion promise to provide more resources to Arizona's public K-12 education system by finalizing an implementation of the 20 by 2020 plan and by fully restoring the additional assistance portion of formula funding to schools. The fiscal year 2019 budget established a 5-year plan to restore $371 million suspended from the basic state aid formula for additional assistance. Additional assistance is flexible funding that can be used for expenditures outside of typical maintenance and operations costs, such as for textbooks, technology, and curriculum. The fiscal year 2021 executive budget accelerates restoration of additional assistance by providing $204 million in initiatives and baseline funding to fully restore this portion of the basic state aid formula 2 years ahead of schedule. Additionally, the executive provides the third installment of the 20 by 2020 plan to increase teacher pay by 20% in school year 2020, bringing the total investment in Arizona's teachers to $645 million. Combined, the impact of these initiatives totals over $1 billion in additional and permanent dollars for education. The 2020 enacted budget included $32 million in school safety grant funding to support the costs of placing school resource officers, school counselors, and social workers on campus in order to promote safe learning environments. This past fall, schools submitted grant funding requests totaling nearly $97 million, more than 3 times what was available. In December 2019, the State Board of Education approved grant awards to distribute the $32 million in available funding, which left 461 unfunded first choice requests at 495 schools. The executive recognizes the critical need to invest more in school safety and provides an increase of $38 million to fund all remaining first choice requests so that every school who submitted a complete application can hire for school safety personnel. This proposal more than doubles the amount of funding for the school safety grant program and will provide an estimated 162 school counselors, 155 social workers, and 144 school resource officers to schools in need. Next, the executive budget includes $44 million for Project Rocket, a 3-year pilot program to help close the achievement gap in Arizona public schools. In fiscal year 2016, a school turnaround pilot at Avondale Elementary District resulted in a 13% increase in students passing the English and Language Arts portion of the statewide assessment and an 18% increase in students passing the math portion. The executive budget proposes expanding this successful pilot statewide in fiscal year 2021. To accomplish this expansion, the executive proposes $44 million to establish a grant program which can be used to support implementation of proven turnaround strategies. Schools that receive a D or an F on the statewide letter grade framework may opt into this program, as well as C schools with 60% or higher free and reduced lunch. The executive estimates that 554 schools will qualify for this funding. Additionally, the pilot will include first priority access in the Beat the Odds Leadership Academy, which provides professional development and leadership training to school officials. The executive contemplates that the State Board of Education will administer this grant program and may use up to $1 million of the appropriation for administrative costs. Results-based funding was first introduced in fiscal year 2018 to reward schools with high academic achievement and to incentivize the expansion and replication of high-performing schools. The original law distributed results-based funding using AZ merit scores in fiscal year 2018 and contemplated a transition to distributing funding using the letter grade framework beginning in fiscal year 2019. Despite this original intent, results-based funding is still distributed using AZ merit scores in both fiscal year 2019 and 2020, but the executive contemplates this transition to the letter grade framework under the fiscal year 2021 budget. Distributing results-based funding using the letter grade accomplishes 2 goals. First, using AZ merit scores focuses solely on proficiency, while the letter grade system includes other measurements of academic performance, such as growth. Second, using the top percentile of AZ merit means that if one school improves, another school must necessarily drop out of the top and lose that funding. Using the letter grade system ensures that all schools can be recognized for their results. The executive budget also proposes going beyond the original intent of the law, which would reward A schools only. The executive expands the distribution formula to include B schools with 60% or higher free and reduced lunch. This is taking into account the extra resources required by the schools that have high rates of poverty and yet still continue to perform above the statewide average. The executive provides $35 million to support program expansion of results-based funding to an estimated 743 schools in fiscal year 2021, totaling $107 million in incentive payments. Next, my colleague Zach will discuss investments in Arizona classrooms.
Thanks, Sarah. My name's Zach, and I'm a forecaster and budget analyst with OSPB. The executive budget includes funding for programs that set students up for success in the classroom and beyond. Earning college credit by passing qualifying exams allows Arizona students and families to save money on tuition and allows students to graduate sooner. The College Board estimates that students save $48 million thanks to passing advanced placement tests in 2018. The executive budget expands the college credit by examination incentive program and provides funding to waive fees for low-income students to continue to encourage Arizona students to take college placement exams. The college credit by examination incentive program provides a per-pupil award to schools for each student that passes a qualifying exam. Since its creation, the number of passing exams has increased from 13,338 in fiscal year 2018 to 22,296 in fiscal year 2019. That increase generated demand for $7.1 million in incentive payments, or $2.1 million in excess of the program's $5 million appropriation. Awards were prorated to account for excess demand in fiscal year 19. By providing $2.1 million, the executive budget fully funds excess program demand in fiscal year 2021. The executive budget also includes funding to fully waive test fees for low-income students who take examinations that qualify for college credit. The graph on the right shows the number of students qualifying for free and reduced price lunch that took the advanced placement test between fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2020. Currently, Arizona students qualifying for free and reduced price lunch pay $35 per test out of pocket after rebates and other state support. The executive budget provides $1 million to eliminate this financial hurdle and enable qualifying students to take college placement exams free of charge. The executive budget also provides $2 million in grant funding to support arts education programs and $1 million to make gifted education grant program permanent. Attracting and retaining teachers for the classroom and giving students the tools they need to succeed is key for academic success. The executive budget includes $500,000 to expand the Alternative Teacher Development Program, doubling the amount of funding available to Teach for America Phoenix. TFA places and retains teachers in high-need classrooms. The average free and reduced price lunch rate in the state is 56%, and the average teacher retention rate is 78%. While in TFA classrooms, the free and reduced price lunch rate is 84% and the teacher retention rate 93%. The executive budget provides $400,000 to expand the Jobs for Arizona Graduates program. Jobs for Arizona Graduates targets youth that experience barriers to education and career success by providing support to improve academic skills and ensure success in college and the workforce. In the 2018 to 2019 school year, 708 high school-age students participated in high school programming. Of these participants, a significant portion qualified for free and reduced price lunch. Many were homeless, runaways, or in foster care, and nearly half had at least one parent who did not complete high school. For those 708 high school students enrolled in the Jobs for Arizona Graduates program, 71% increased their GPA and 58% improved attendance. Now moving on to school capital, the School Facilities Board, or SFB, is the capital management agency for Arizona schools. SFB is mandated to ensure compliance with building adequacy standards and routine preventative maintenance guidelines for both new and existing buildings through the awarding of building renewal grant funds. Due to aging building systems such as roofs and HVAC systems, building renewal grant spending has increased in each of the last 2 fiscal years, as demonstrated on the graph here. Also detailed on the graph in yellow, fiscal year 2020 building renewal grant spending is projected to exceed the current appropriation of $80 million. As of December 2019, SFB has already awarded 78% of the original fiscal year 2020 appropriation, despite being only halfway through this current fiscal year. The executive budget demonstrates a commitment to ensuring Arizona schools facilities are fully funded. First, the executive budget includes $35 million in supplemental funding for fiscal year 2020 building renewal grants, bringing the total appropriation to $115 million. Second, the budget includes a total of $108 million in funding for fiscal year 2021 building renewal grants, which includes $17 million in ongoing funding plus an increase in $91 million in one-time funding. This total appropriation represents a 35% increase over fiscal year 2020 appropriation base of $80 million. In addition to overseeing the maintenance of existing school facilities, SFB also administers state funds to school districts that require the construction of new schools. Each year, SFB determines if districts will meet demographic benchmarks, which will necessitate the construction of new schools. As such, 2 new facilities have been approved for construction in fiscal year 2021 with a total base funding amount of $11.7 million. In keeping with the executive's commitment to fully funding our Arizona schools, the executive budget includes an additional $6.4 million in funding to enhance the current square foot funding allotments for new school construction in fiscal year 2021. This increases the average funding per square foot allotment from $180 to $287 per square foot for urban districts, with similar increases for rural districts. This initiative will also increase the executive investment in new school construction in fiscal year 2022 by $15.5 million. Next up, my colleague Yan will discuss higher education initiatives in the executive budget.
Good afternoon. My name is Yang Gao, and I'm a budget analyst, and I will be discussing some of the higher education initiatives in the budget. The executive budget includes a total investment of $80 million for Arizona public universities. This is part of Regents Chair Dr. Larry Penley's proposal of what he calls the New Economy Initiative. This initiative is an innovative approach to enhance the university's capacity to graduate more students for the critical jobs today and tomorrow in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In addition, the executive budget includes another $35 million in ongoing support. In addition, the executive budget includes an ongoing support of $35 million for the New Economy Initiative. The executive budget also continues last year's $35 million one-time support for university operating and flexible university capital needs. The executive budget also includes $10 million to provide a state match for federal grant proposals pursued by Arizona public universities. This will allow universities to be more competitive in pursuing national research grants to accelerate the university's transformation into adaptive drivers of economic success for the state. Next, the executive budget continues to invest in Arizona's future teachers and includes $1 million for Arizona's Teachers Academy to attract more potential teachers. Through the Teachers Academy, Arizona has made a commitment to our aspiring teachers that if you stay and teach in Arizona, we will pay your tuition debt-free. Arizona's Teachers Academy enrollment has skyrocketed with 2,170 students participating since its inception in 2018. In fact, Arizona has experienced the second highest growth in new teachers enrolling in teacher preparation programs. The left chart shows that the yellow line represents Arizona teacher prep program enrollment growth, and the blue line represents teacher prep enrollment growth nationally. As you can see, in fact, Arizona is one of 5 states to see the increase in enrollment over the past years. The Arizona Board of Regents plans to reach out even more students through a robust marketing campaign in the next year, and the executive budget contemplates expanding eligibility to the program to more students to enhance the state's momentum to address the national teacher shortage crisis. Next, the executive budget includes targeted investments for community college districts to fully fund the Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, and Workforce Program Aid formula for the first time since 2018 for Maricopa, Pima, and Pinal Community College districts. The STEM and Workforce Formula Aid program provides community college districts with funds to pursue STEM partnerships with businesses and educational institutions, fund additional faculty, purchase equipment, and expand teacher and student career services and address capital needs. In addition, the executive budget includes $6 million to expand education opportunities at 10 Arizona rural community college districts. This is for flexible operating funding and career and technical education programs. Furthermore, the executive budget includes $4 million to the Arizona Commerce Authority to expand the Arizona Advanced Technology Corridor to help enhance and accelerate workforce development in community colleges. Up next, my colleague Ryan will be discussing some of the public safety initiatives in the budget.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Vergara, and I'm a budget manager at OSPB. Today, along with my colleague Kylie, we will be providing a brief overview of some of the public safety initiatives included in the fiscal year 2021 executive budget. This budget makes strategic investments to enhance and modernize public safety statewide, provides competitive pay for targeted personnel, and equips public safety workers with the tools they need to fulfill their mission. A cornerstone of the executive budget is a comprehensive investment into the Department of Corrections. The vast majority of that money will go towards three primary goals: increasing employee pay, repairing aged infrastructure, and funding additional educational and programming opportunities for inmates. The next 3 slides will provide additional details on some of these investments. The executive budget provides $33 million to fund a multi-phased project that will close down the majority of the Florence Prison Complex, with the exception of the Globe Unit, partner with county jail facilities and other third parties to house inmates, and move existing staff from the Florence Prison to the Iman Prison Complex. As the table on the slide indicates, both prisons face problematic correctional officer 2 vacancy rates that make achieving safe and desired staffing levels difficult and sometimes impossible. The closure of the Florence Prison, which is past the point of repair, is estimated to save the state between $150 and $400 million. The executive budget also supports an ongoing $8.1 million appropriation from the Medical Marijuana Fund to improve the provision of substance abuse treatment services to inmates. The plan funds a significant expansion of substance abuse counseling at the Department of Corrections and is projected to allow an additional 2,000 inmates to complete substance abuse counseling annually. Additionally, this funding will establish a medical loan repayment program at the Department of Health Services to provide loan repayment reimbursements to individuals providing substance abuse counseling in correctional environments. The funding will also be utilized to hire additional employment specialists and to fund an Access Reach-In program to provide additional resources and treatments to inmates convicted of drug possession as they transition back into society. The executive budget includes an increase in funding to fund an additional 10 correctional education program teacher positions to increase the department's ability to provide special education and mandatory literacy classes to inmates. Recent data showed that approximately 2,100 students awaited placement into functional literacy courses, and the caseload of special education teachers in Tucson was at 26-1. The department plans to assign 2 teaching positions to the Tucson prison to reduce the special education student-teacher ratio to 15-1. The remaining 8 teaching positions will be used to reduce the functional literacy backlog by approximately 1,280 inmates per year. The executive budget also includes an increase in funding for the department to partner with the Foundation for Blind Children to expand the prison Braille transcription program. Currently, through a partnership with the Department of Education and local school districts, inmates are trained to transcribe student textbooks into Braille, allowing students with visual impairment to gain access to the same education as their sighted peers. This funding will provide salaries for 1 program manager, 2 Braille instructors, and the machinery required for printing and binding. With this funding, the program is expected to train an additional 100 inmates to become Braille transcription certified, as well as provide printing and binding production jobs for an additional 100 inmates. Up next, Kylie will discuss additional investments included in this year's budget.
Hello, I'm Kylie Jensen and I'm a budget analyst. Over the past 10 years, driving under the influence arrests have increased 156%, over 5 times the increase in vehicle registrations over that same time period. In order to save lives and prevent DUI and wrong-way driving incidents, the executive tackles this problem by 4 coordinated interagency investments at the Department of Public Safety, or DPS, Liquor, the Governor's Office of Highway Safety, and the Arizona Department of Transportation, or ADOT. The investments at DPS and Liquor will provide extra personnel to these agencies to detect, investigate, and prevent wrong-way and impaired driving. The additional staff at Liquor will be used to work with local law enforcement in investigating deaths and severe accidents involving alcohol, where liquor license establishments appear to be a factor. At DPS, 6 additional night watch troopers will patrol Maricopa County from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. when most of these incidents occur. Additional grant funding will be provided over the next 3 years to local law enforcement via the Governor's Office of Highway Safety to conduct additional traffic stops. And ADOT will be making technological investments in thermal cameras to better detect and respond to wrong-way drivers at night. The executive provides a comprehensive life cycle replacement plan for DPS's vehicles and helicopters to bring the critical life-saving equipment into industry standards of compliance. This plan involves purchasing 2 helicopters in FY 2021 and lease purchasing a helicopter every 2 years afterward. For vehicles, this plan requires the department to lease purchase 1/6 of its total vehicle fleet each year for 6 years. DPS owns, operates, and maintains a statewide microwave network that provides critical public safety radio communications for 12 state agencies, over 12,000 users, and a number of local, federal, and tribal agencies. The microwave infrastructure has been aging and not supported by the industry for over 20 years. The upgrades will modernize DPS's radio system and will provide peace of mind to first responders, ensuring 99.999% reliability, a maximum downtime of 5 minutes in any 12-month period. The budget includes a $1.2 million supplemental in FY 2019 to start site permitting work on this project and plans to have critical updates completed at the end of FY 2023. The appropriation is advance appropriated and lapse after 2 years, similar to other capital projects. In order to ensure the safety, efficiency, and transparency of DPS troopers and sworn personnel, the executive budget provides a comprehensive body camera plan to equip every sworn member and DPS task force member with their own body camera. This funding provides for all the back-end equipment, software, and data storage associated with the cameras, as well as for 20 staff responsible for video management and redaction services. Highlighted here are the other major targeted investments at the Department of Public Safety. The executive provides $6 million to fund the construction of a district office for coverage of the new portion of the Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway. Notably, $2.9 million is used to fully fund the department's overtime expenses across all divisions, including accrued compensation time to alleviate staffing shortage problems created by using vacancy savings and adjusting out trooper schedules to fund overtime. This overtime investment could hire up to 11 troopers from reallocated vacancy savings. The executive also invests in a regular equipment replacement cycle for agency computers and for increased expenses at the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center and the Crime Lab. Funds the replacement of the worst remote housing units, maintains last year's investment in AZ Post, and provides life-saving, rifle-resistant equipment to all sworn personnel. The Supreme Court and the Administrative Office of the Courts, or the AOC, handle the administration of all of the 200-plus courts within the state. There are over 10,000 employees within its purview. Over the years, it has become more and more difficult for the AOC to recruit talented staff with the necessary years of court experience. In fact, the top reason staff are leaving the AOC is for higher paying jobs, excluding retirements. The average turnover rate the courts have seen over the last 2 fiscal years has been just over 12%. Additionally, 22% of the AOC's workforce will be eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. In regards to judges' salaries, currently Arizona ranks 39th in justices' salaries, while Court of Appeals judges' salaries rank 31st, and Superior Court judges rank 35th across the country. Closer to home, the current Gilbert municipal judge salary is $205,000, and the Glendale judge is at $198,000, well above what our current justices are compensated at. The executive includes $5.6 million to make the court's pay rates more competitive. My colleague Jacob will now go over Government That Works.
Thanks, Kylie, and good afternoon. My name is Jacob Wingate. I'm a budget manager here at OSPB. My colleague Zach and I will be highlighting priorities in the Government That Works section of the budget. The executive budget exhibits the hallmarks of a responsible government by driving efficiencies, expanding opportunities for business, and enhancing and securing public assets. The state of Arizona owns and operates more than 5,700 facilities around the state to serve Arizonans. Each year, the executive evaluates needs for repairs or upgrades, as well as opportunities to improve government services through new construction. The executive budget includes $275 million for capital projects and building renewal. And with this funding, the state can enhance transportation infrastructure, make critical prison repairs, modernize state office buildings, construct a new facility for the state troopers patrolling the new section of Loop 202, as Kylie just mentioned, replace crumbling public safety housing units in remote areas of the state, and repair dams and fish hatcheries throughout the state. Arizona is a great place to do business, as shown by the economic growth that Glenn described earlier. And with the targeted investment in technology, it's going to get even better. The executive budget includes $8 million to continue developing a business one-stop system, which will streamline interactions with the state government and make it easier for new business owners to navigate legal requirements to start a business. This online portal will provide a central location to submit information and track application progress. We expect the system to speed up state agency reviews and approvals, allowing businesses to get up and running faster. Design of the system is already underway, and with this funding, the first phase will launch in fiscal year 2021. The state's investments in cybersecurity in recent years have focused on prevention, designed to strengthen our frontline defenses. The executive budget builds on these efforts, investing $12 million to enhance the state's ability to respond and recover if an incident were to occur. In the immediate aftermath of an incident, a rapid response is critical. The executive budget expands the Arizona National Guard's Cyber Task Force, which can deploy in an emergency to isolate the threat, prevent further damage, and begin system restoration. In addition to this response capability, this versatile group of highly trained soldiers and airmen can strengthen the state's cyber defenses by conducting vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. Currently, the state has limited resources to recover from a catastrophic data breach. Although such incidents are rare, the potential for extensive financial loss and system downtime present a significant risk. The executive budget includes funding to develop a statewide cybersecurity risk management program to address this concern. Through the program, the state will partner with a private vendor for cyber insurance coverage and post-incident support response for all state agencies. These initiatives will strengthen the state's cybersecurity resilience, allowing for a faster and stronger recovery. My colleague Zach will be up next to discuss telecommunication and transportation infrastructure.
My name is Zachary Harris, the budget analyst at OSPB. Increasing access to advanced telecommunications is key to strengthening public safety, expanding healthcare services, and bolstering economic development throughout the state. The executive approaches this in two ways. One, creating smart highway corridors, and two, bolstering the rural broadband grant program. The Smart Highway Corridor Initiative includes laying 514 miles of fiber optics and installing multiple smart highway technologies across 3 strategic corridors. These corridors include the entire length of I-40 and I-19, as well as includes I-17 from Flagstaff to Sunset Point, which connects to fiber already being installed between Anthem and Sunset Point. This infrastructure opens the door for providing future broadband capacity for smart infrastructure projects in Arizona's rural and tribal areas. Additionally, the executive budget triples the funding for the recently established Rural Broadband Grant Program. This funding will be split between supporting broadband infrastructure development and supporting community broadband planning. In addition to investing in Arizona's advanced telecommunication infrastructure, the executive budget also focuses on the vital transportation corridor that connects Phoenix and Tucson. The portion of Interstate 10 between Phoenix and Tucson is an essential transportation and commerce corridor for the state, and widening it to 6 lanes will improve public safety and enhance economic development opportunities in central Arizona and the Gila River Indian community. The executive recognizes this and takes the first step by including $28 million, along with $50 million being reprogrammed from the Arizona Department of Transportation's 5-year program for a new 6-lane bridge that replaces the current 60-year-old Gila River Bridge. This replacement will ultimately allow for the acceleration of future improvements to the I-10 corridor that connects Phoenix and Tucson. Today, the 1,500 residents of Tonto Basin must drive across a creek bed to get from one side of their community to the other. High waters often inhibit residents from crossing, and the governor recognizes the need for a new bridge to connect both sides of the community. Last week, the governor called upon the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation to fund the $20 million bridge that would improve safety, quality of life, and economic opportunity for the community. In addition, the governor has instructed the Arizona Department of Transportation to assist Gila County in its application. The department has already begun reviewing the engineering details to help ensure that this project gets done. Next, my colleague Sarah will discuss the natural resource section.
Hello, I'm Sarah Bingham, and I'm a budget analyst. Last year, the governor led the effort to pass the Drought Contingency Plan, which was the most significant water policy in 40 years. However, we should not protect our environment one resource at a time. Therefore, the fiscal year 2021 executive budget takes a holistic approach in protecting our air, land, and water. In 2015, the United States Environmental Protection Agency raised the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ground level ozone. Arizona's unique geography and weather patterns makes it difficult to reach this new level of attainment. As can be seen in this chart, the Phoenix area has had a significant number of days above this new standard in recent years. Without improvement, Arizona faces future penalties from the federal government that would negatively impact economic growth in the state. To address this, the executive budget includes funding for a travel reduction public awareness campaign and funding to implement the remote testing pilot program authorized last year by Laws 2019, Chapter 141. The Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund program, known as WARF, is Arizona's alternative to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's approach to remediation of contaminated hazardous waste sites. Through WARF, the state maintains control over determining financial and other responsibility of site remediation. 6 years ago, the program had only closed one hazardous site since its inception in 1986. As this chart shows, the state now has removed 6 sites. To continue that accelerated progress, the executive budget includes full funding for WARF as statutorily authorized. WARF has not been fully funded as authorized by statute since fiscal year 2007. With warmer climates and federal forests that have not been adequately maintained, Arizona faces a larger number of fires at a higher per acre cost. To address this changing environment, the executive budget repays all outstanding bills the state owes federal partners, increases the general fund deposit into the fire suppression fund, and raises firefighter pay at the Department of Forestry and Fire Management by 5%, in recognition of longer wildfire seasons and increased work hours and risks to the state's firefighters. Next, Yan will be discussing some initiatives related to health and welfare.
Next, my colleague and I, Stephanie, will be discussing some of the health and welfare initiatives included in the executive budget. One of the fundamental purposes of state government is to provide critical services and support for Arizona's most needy and vulnerable citizens. This executive budget helps vulnerable Arizonans with an emphasis on children who are in foster care or victims of abuse. The executive budget continues to invest $23 million to expand access to quality child care for working and foster families by providing incentive bonuses to quality child care facilities and sustaining the suspension of the waiting list for child care and providing up to $200 of kinship family reimbursement to cover the cost of one-time child care enrollment fees. In addition, the executive budget makes good on the commitment to increase the number of children in loving forever families. The executive budget includes $14 million in funding new adoptions. On top of funding baseline caseload growth, the executive budget includes one-time incentive of $5,000 per child to encourage the adoption of sibling groups, and more than doubles the adoption subsidy rate for children with significant developmental disabilities to ensure that all children are in loving forever homes. Building on last year's 5% Department of Child Safety caseworker pay increase, the executive budget includes $11 million for a 10% pay increase for caseworkers and its mission-critical staff. This will bring caseworker pay up to market rates when comparing to neighboring states. In fiscal year 2021, the executive budget continues to support kinship families by doubling the grandmother's stipend to $150 a month to promote lifelong family connections and lessen the disruption of removal. In an effort to strengthen Arizona's newborn screening program, the executive works to close the structural deficit in the newborn screening fund by combining the costs of two existing screening fees and increasing the total screening fee from $101 to $113. This will add 2 new tests to all Arizona newborns to detect muscular and neural disorders early on. Finally, the executive budget includes a funding for a dependency alternative program in 13 rural counties to help families and children involved in dependency petitions. Pima County's program had an impressive success between 2015 and 2018, in which more than 300 children were kept out of the foster care system due to participation in the program. The executive budget expands this program as a 3-year pilot to keep more children and families together. Next, my colleague will be discussing other health and welfare initiatives.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. This budget includes initiatives that address 2 growing health concerns for Arizona. First, the executive is dedicated to addressing the ongoing opioid crisis. As part of the Opioid Action Plan, in January 2018, $10 million was deposited from the general fund for the purposes of providing services to Arizonans struggling with substance abuse. Between February 2018 and September 2019, the funding provided 42,880 services, including copay support, doctor's visits, lab tests, and methadone administration to 23,328 Arizonans. This funding will be completely expended by the end of fiscal year 2020. To continue support of uninsured and underinsured Arizonans in need of substance abuse treatment, the executive budget supports a $6 million deposit from the Medical Marijuana Fund to reach an additional 18,000 Arizonans in fiscal year 2021. Second, the executive budget addresses the pressing concern of suicide. In 2017, suicide was the 8th leading cause of death in the state of Arizona. The executive prioritizes a suicide prevention plan that includes $400,000 for the creation of a suicide mortality review team. The team will track suicide-related deaths statewide to identify suicide and self-harm hotspots, their causes, and detect gaps in reporting to inform policy change that reduces suicide mortality among high-risk populations. The initiative is part of a larger suicide prevention plan that includes enhancing crisis response teams, expanding crisis resource services, and a social isolation campaign for outreach to target populations. To highlight the natural beauty and diversity of the state of Arizona, the executive budget includes $1 million to expand various statewide destination marketing initiatives. These include the Rural and Marketing Cooperative Match Program, a competitive grant program which would allow at least 4 more rural and tribal communities to purchase marketing options, a Leave No Trace campaign to minimize visitor impact on the environment and educate tourists about sustainable practices while visiting Arizona destinations, a marketing initiative to highlight new direct flights from Denver to Flagstaff and Prescott, and the promotion of Arizona as a travel destination at national consumer trade shows and travel exhibits in Chicago, Dallas, Minneapolis, New York, and San Francisco. Finally, the executive is committed to providing more services for our veterans, which is why the fiscal year 2021 executive budget includes funding for 6 additional veterans benefits counselors. Counselors help veterans request for military service records, upgrade military discharges, apply for special veterans license plates, provide information on general state benefits, and assist with other questions about veteran benefits and entitlements. Counselors currently bring in $600 million to the state annually. The 6 positions are estimated to bring an additional $120 million annually to the state. The Arizona Department of Veterans Services plans to place the new counselors in Quartzsite, Anthem, Tuba City, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Holbrook, and Chinle. The new counselors will increase accessibility to counseling and bring in more federal benefits to veterans in these areas. I'll now pass it back to Director Matt Gress for our closing remarks.
So the FY 2021 budget maintains fiscal discipline. We project total revenues in fiscal year 21 at $12.49 billion. We have a $12.3 billion spending plan. We deposit $25 million into the rainy day fund to maintain that 8.8% balance as a share of general fund revenues, leaving us with an ending balance of $164 million and a structural surplus of $250 million. And I think that these policies that we've shared with you today, they represent a framework we're calling the Arizona Way. And it's a commitment of ours to keep this state as a place for people to start a new life, a fresh start, full of opportunity. And it takes a government to promote economic prosperity, to use taxpayer dollars responsibly, not to create a bigger government, but a government that allows Arizonans to keep more of what they've earned to invest in their families and their futures. For more before I go on to where you can find the budget ad, I just want to thank all of my staff for their tireless work in evaluating budget requests, meeting with stakeholders, looking into various policies to put together a budget that I think all of us as a state can be proud of. You'll be able to find this budget online at azgovernor.gov or at azospb.gov. And with that, we will be here after the briefing to take any questions that you might have. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you.